Hi guys and girls, what you're looking at here is the introduction page to Investigation 2.4, What's the Story? Interpreting Graphs. So what I'm going to have you work on today is just taking a look at different graphs and seeing if you can figure out the story behind the graphs, because every graph has a story. So this page says information about variables is often given by the coordinate graphs. It's important to be good at reading the story in a graph. Here are some questions to ask when you look at a graph. What are the variables? Do the values of one variable seem to depend on the values of the other? What does the shape of the graph say about the relationships between the variables? For example, taking a look at these two graphs, the number of cars in your school's parking lot change as time passes during a school day. These two graphs show possibilities for the way that the number of cars in a parking lot might change over time. So you should be able to look at these two graphs and figure out the story behind them if you're thinking about cars in a parking lot. Now, the first one may be that everybody travels to school, parks their cars in the parking lot. So you can see here that there is a slight increase, and then there's a lull where none of the cars are moving. Everybody's just parked there. Then there's this huge increase, which may be because there's a school function taking place where a lot of other people come and park their cars. When the school function's over, those cars leave, and it goes back to just the staff members, teachers' cars in the parking lot. And then at the end of the day, everybody else leaves, and then the parking lot is empty. Where this may be more of a regular school day, where we have the teachers, staff members, everybody come park in the parking lot. As the day goes on, everybody just kind of sits there. There's nothing that really happens until the end of the school day when everybody decides to leave. So it says describe the story each graph tells about the school parking lot, which we have just done. Which graphs show the pattern you would expect? So we would say graph 2 is more of a typical school day. And then how could you label the graph you choose so that someone else would know what it represents? So that's what we're going to be focusing on today, this right here. And what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you take a look at different graphs, and you're going to be able to match graphs with scenarios. So for example, here, just looking at that graph, you wouldn't be able to tell that it's talking about cars in a parking lot. But what I'd like you to do is think about the variables. So cars in a parking lot and time. We know time is independent, and that would go on the x-axis. So on your paper, I would have you label time here, and then I would have you label number of cars along the side on your y-axis because it's your independent variable. Your independent variable, time, you cannot change. Your dependent variable, number of cars, depends on the time or maybe the event taking place that day. And then give your graph a title. So here we would probably say school parking lot. Okay, so you're going to have directions put on the board from your sub, and it's going to tell you to decide what the variables are, decide which is dependent and independent variable, think about the graph and the story that the graph tells. And then what I'm going to have you do is draw your own graph for the scenario given and see if you can think about, after you have all of your graphs drawn, which one of these graphs best matches the graph you have drawn. When you're ready and all of your graphs have been drawn, your substitute will have these graphs for you, and then you can go through and see which ones match the graphs that you have, or you can decide if you want to stick with your own graph. But remember, you need to make sure that you go through and give your graph a title, a label for the x-axis, a label for the y-axis, which are your dependent and independent variables. When you're finished, you can turn it into the tray, and we will surely go over these together tomorrow.